Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is out in theaters, the fifth and supposedly final part of the Indiana Jones franchise, directed for the first time not by Steven Spielberg, who remained involved as a producer, but by James Mangold, previously made movies such as Girl Interrupted, Walk the Line, 3:10 to Yuma, Logan, and Ford vs. Ferrari. The film stars, of course, Harrison Ford returning as Indy, as well as Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Mads Mikkelsen, Boyd Holbrook, and Antonio Banderas. Story opens with essentially a flashback to 1945, where a digitally de-aged Indy is caught by the Nazis in France, and then after a long and exciting action sequence on a train, makes off with half of an artifact. A dial made by Archimedes in the ancient times, which seems very complex and supposedly could predict weather patterns, but nobody is sure of the extent of its full capabilities. Then we skip ahead to 1969, where Old Man Indy is approached by his goddaughter, Helena, who wants the dial, who wants to find the other half of the dial and sell it on the black market. But on her trail, there's Mads Mikkelsen, a former Nazi, now a scientist who helped the Apollo space program, a character that is based quite heavily on the real-life figure of Werner von Braun. He wants the dial for himself because he believes it can allow him to actually travel back in time and prevent the Nazi Germany from ever losing the war. Indy gets involved and thus begins his final adventure. So, much like with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull 15 years ago, there were many people online saying that the movie would suck even before its release, that it's been too long since the last one, that the original trilogy is perfect and shouldn't be touched by further sequels, that Harrison Ford is too old, that it's just going to be a cash grab. But where Crystal Skull turned out to be quite deserving of criticism, I think Dial of Destiny is actually a much stronger movie, even though, let's be honest, it doesn't quite reach the same level of the original trilogy. First of all, let me just say that Harrison Ford, who was almost 80 during filming, is in phenomenal shape for his years, and that certainly helps sell all the action. Now, I mean, he is visibly old, and the movie actually also reflects that, but the physical stuff that is there, that he is involved in, is fairly believable. He also doesn't phone it in terms of just the performance. I thought he does a very good job in terms of acting, especially in the quieter, sadder moments, and in the ending scene, which I found quite touching indeed. It's very clear that it's not just a job for him, that he cared about making this film. I also think that the movie manages to capture quite well the thing that worked with the old indie films, which is it's a fun, globe-trotting adventure with lots of locations, lots of action, chases, snappy dialogue, smart and creative characters, and supernatural elements to spice things up. I think Mads Mikkelsen is a phenomenal villain. He really elevates the film with a performance that I think is much subtler than the film of this caliber even deserves. The scene early on in a hotel where he interacts with a black waiter is amazing, and in general, Mads does a lot with understated expressions and physical movements that communicate more than the dialogue itself. I thought Phoebe Waller-Bridge is entertaining, although her character is straight up a sociopath if you think about it, and the least likable of all the sidekicks in the entire franchise. The special effects are very good. I was actually impressed by the de-aging tech done on Harrison Ford in the first act. It looks spectacular, honestly. And the one thing that stood out was the voice. He sounds older than he looks like in the flashback, but in purely visual terms, I mean, technology is really, really impressive by now. There's also a lot of things I liked about the final act, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone, so just believe me that it's quite fun, especially towards the end. My one gripe would be that the movie feels a bit too long. It is the longest in the franchise at 2 hours 34 minutes, and about half an hour could honestly been shaved off of it. Like the chase in Tangier goes on for incredibly long, and I also thought that the diving sequence felt like padding time. It isn't very exciting, it doesn't add too much, and it's mainly just a pretext to have some slower character moments in between, which I think could also have been achieved slightly differently. Overall, though, I liked it. I think it's a decent film. I saw it get a mixed reception, but I think it's a perfectly enjoyable summer blockbuster. It's not as great as the original trilogy and certainly won't reach that classic status, but at the same time it is much better than Crystal Skull. I found it entertaining.